Thomas Jefferson was well loved as the father of the Declaration. And maybe you don't realize just how involved he was in the early, not just writing the Declaration of Independence, but in the early years of the American government. He wasn't a part of the Constitutional Committee coming up with that. He was, I believe, at the time in France as Secretary of State and serving in some other areas. But then at the end of the 18th century into the 19th century, ran for president. And as president of the United States, as the third president, facilitated the Louisiana Purchase and also helped finance the Lewis and Clark expedition. He helped secure the United States. He was involved in the First Barbary War, and he tried to keep relations with warring Great Britain and France. And so Thomas Jefferson was a really pivotal figure in those early days of America. However, his time was not without scandal. First of all, there was the scandal of Sally Hemings, his slave, who he had fathered a son with. But the other scandal that rocked his administration was regarding his vice president, a man named Aaron Burr. We'll talk about him as we go along. And as we have seen, maybe in recent days, there's sometimes tension. Sometimes there's a wonderful cooperation between the president and the vice president, and sometimes there's a little bit of tension there. And sometimes there's a little bit of backdoor maneuverings that happen that cause some bad feelings, not just within two people, but even within a whole party. Friendships and relationships can be a wonderful, helpful part of our human experience. Many presidents have been, again, helped by their vice presidents. Others, for instance, Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew, have not been helped by that. We are helped by our friends, and we welcome friendships that will encourage us and help us along. But have you ever had to put some distance between you and a friend or you and a relative? A relationship that should have been strong, that should have been a blessing and to help to you, all of a sudden became something quite the opposite, where you actually had to make some distinctive lines between you and that person. When you ask the question, what breaks down relationships? What makes relationships hard? I would have to say the number one relationship destroyer is selfishness. Because in any kind of relationship, there is a natural give. Now there is take sometime, right? If you're just giving, that makes for somewhat a hard relationship. And I think all of us have those kinds of relationships where you just give, and receive very little. Even in some ways, parenting sometimes feels like that, right? Now that my kids are older, I've been the wonderful recipient of blessings from my kids as well. I love you guys, okay? I'm not saying we just give, but for a while, it really felt like we were just... Anyway... Luke is laughing nervously. And that changes. But in any relationship, if one of the people in the relationship becomes very selfish, where it all becomes about them, that is a great way to destroy the relationship. In 2 Samuel 3, the situation we find ourselves is that David is king over Judah, the tribe that's to the south, and they have a significant portion of real estate in Israel, but it's not all 12 tribes. It's only one tribe. David is ruling from Hebron. And remember, we talked not last week, but last time, 2 weeks ago, that there was a war between the northern tribes. Abner had put in Ishbosheth as king, and the southern tribe of Judah. And remember, we talked about how there was this skirmish that ended in the death of many, many Israelites and a few people from Judah, most notably Asahel, who was one of David's nephews and Joab's brother. In chapter 3, verse 1, we start off with this prologue. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. The next few verses talk about David's family, and we don't really need to visit that right now, except to say that David was having many children, and part of the reason he had many children is that he had many wives. Now, the Bible had said already to kings, don't multiply wives, and the model for the Bible was that it'd be one man and one woman for life, right? And so there it is. but David didn't do that. Now, God's grace is great. This is not the first thing that God will overlook in blessing David's life, but it will become a problem and a snare to him later. So don't think just because the Bible describes something that it condones something. Sometimes it just describes something. It just says, this is the way that it was. David, a man after God's own heart, was just like us, sinful. And that's why I think it's important for us to look at the life of David, because God's grace was sufficient to cover those things as well. But then in 2 Samuel 3, it describes this path for David to become king, not just of Judah, but over the whole nation. And it was made by a selfish decision and destroyed by a selfish decision as well. And then David had to come in and try to make it right and try to clean up a big mess that he didn't make, but somebody else did. So we're going to learn about 3 characters and their roles in this understanding of relationships. And hopefully you'll see yourself somewhere where you can say, by God's grace, I want to do the right thing. I want to avoid the wrong thing. Let's first of all look at this character of Abner. Abner was an uncle, as far as we can tell, of Saul. I think it was his father's Kish, his father's brother. That there is some kind of relationship there. And Abner had served well as the commander of the guard, the captain of the host for Saul. Well, now Saul is dead, and it's Abner who really is the de facto leader. He doesn't have the lineage to sit on the throne, but he can be the kingmaker, and so he puts Ishbosheth on the throne. But then there comes a problem. So we pick it up in verse 6. It came to pass, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner made himself strong for the house of Saul. It turns out he had to make quite a few decisions for the house of Saul, and it was really him carrying the whole kingdom on his back. Verse 7, and Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, wherefore hast thou gone in unto my father's concubine? Then was Abner very wroth for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, am I a dog's head, which against Judah do show kindness this day unto the house of Saul thy father, to his brethren and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David, that thou chargest me today with a fault concerning this woman? So do God to Abner, and more also, except as the Lord hath sworn to David, even so I do to him, to translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. And he, Ishbosheth, could not answer Abner a word again because he feared him. All right, so Abner is serving and in this losing kingdom. David's getting stronger and Saul's kingdom is getting weaker, and Abner is trying to keep this thing together. And then all of a sudden Ishbosheth comes in, and from what I could tell, and I thought about this week, I don't think that Abner did the thing that Ishbosheth accused him of, but what Ishbosheth accused him of is taking or having a relationship with one of Saul's concubines. Saul's dead, but going and having a relationship with one of the concubines was really sort of the same thing as saying, I'd like to be king. You're hoping that an heir is produced, and then you can say, see, there's a relationship here. So that's not the way we think, but that's definitely the way they thought. Later on, we'll find when David leaves Jerusalem that Absalom comes in and has relations with the concubines of David, and that is a play for the throne. So that's what's going on here. I personally don't think by Abner's response that he did it. But it was enough for Ishbosheth to say, what are you doing? Trying to make a play for the throne? And that is the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. Abner says, you know what? This isn't worth it. All of this, I've had it. I have not delivered you over to David. I have been serving you even though we're losing, and I don't need this kind of scrutiny from you, Ishbosheth. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go talk to David and see if he wants to be king over this whole thing. Right? So Abner, he's had enough. And he's so fierce that the Bible says that Ishbosheth he just kind of like, can't say a word to him. So real squirrely guy, weak leadership, and you understand maybe why Abner just does not want to serve this guy. He wants a real man in leadership. He wants to serve David. So why did he do this? One, he realized that Saul's house was going to lose, and he wanted some kind of escape hatch. I can't be on this sinking ship. I got to do something about this. 2, this week Ishbosheth accused him of trying to make a power play with his concubine. Abner is so offended by this whole thing that he does reach out to David. Look at verse 12. Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, "Whose is the land?" Saying also, "Make thy league with me, and behold, my hand shall be with thee to bring about all Israel unto thee." And he, David, said, "Well, that's a great idea. Thank you. I will make a league with thee, but one thing I require of thee, that is, that thou shalt not see my face, except thou first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when thou comest to see my face." I'll just give you a little bit of a background. So remember that Saul was trying to kill David, and he says, "Oh, maybe if I can't kill him, the Philistines can." So he says, "Oh, you want to marry my daughter? Go and kill some Philistines. Bring me back proof that you killed them, and then you can have my daughter to your wife." And so David did all those things. He married Michal. But then when Saul was trying to kill David escaped out of the window and left Michal. And so Saul gave Michal to be somebody else's wife. And David now says, "I want my wife back." Now, it's been how many years? 10 years, maybe. Some scholars think 10 to 12 years since he's seen her. She's been married to this other guy. But David, I don't think it has anything to do, I don't think it has much to do with love as it does with the political position of being married to Saul's daughter. That's going to be a play for, again, the kingship. If a play for the concubine means you're trying to grab the throne, remarrying the king's daughter definitely does. And so he says, "Could you bring her?" And so, very sad story. Verse 14, David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Deliver me my wife, Michal, which I espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines." And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, even Phaltiel, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her along, weeping behind her to Bahurim. Then said Abner unto him, "Go, return," probably, "or I'll kill you." And so he returned. All right, so there's Abner, and he says, "I'm going to do whatever it takes for you to become king." But there's something wrong with what Abner is doing. He put Ishbosheth on the throne because of Saul, because Saul was the one that had the legitimate claim to the throne. Now, God had already said, Ishbosheth, to Saul, "Your line is not going to stay on the throne. And I'm choosing someone who is a man after my own heart, David." Everybody knew this. This was a public proclamation, and yet Abner still went against what God wanted and put Ishbosheth on the throne, and then afterward realized it was a bad idea. Look at verse 17. Abner had communication with the elders of Israel, saying, "Ye sought for David in times past to be king over you. You wanted this, but I prevented it. But now I've changed my mind." Verse 18, "Now then, do it." Now notice what he says next. "For the Lord hath spoken of David, saying, By the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel out of the hand of the Philistines and out of the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spake in the ears of Benjamin, and Abner went also to speak in the ears of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel, and that seemed good to the whole house of Benjamin." Now again, he admits God said David should be king. He says that. Now he's trying to say to the people of Israel, we really shouldn't have put Ishbosheth on the throne. You shouldn't serve him anyway, because God said that David was supposed to be the king. Question, did he just realize this? No, he knew this beforehand. Then look at number 9. So look at verse number 9. "So do God to Abner, and more also, except as the Lord hath sworn to David, even so I do to him." All right, so again, Abner knew this is God's will, that David be on the throne, but he didn't do it. Why? Well, because he wanted to be the de facto leader. He wanted to be the one in charge. And it wasn't until all of a sudden David started winning more battles and the house of Saul got weaker and weaker, and he realized not only could he not really control Ishbosheth, but Ishbosheth was so weak, and now turning on him, Abner says, "I've got to do something else." This was not a man who was saying, "This is right, and this is God's will, and we have to do what is right by the word of the Lord." This is a guy who's an opportunist. He's trying to save his own skin. He's a pragmatist. He's trying to do whatever he can to save his own career and life. Dale Ralph Davis, in his commentary, said this, quote, "Abner only quotes scripture when it supports a pro-Abner move. Abner seeks the kingdom, not because it is a matter of divine promise, but because it is now a piece of sharp policy. Not love for Yahweh's design, but concern over Abner's position is all that matters to him, unquote. So let's take some warnings from this undercutting that Abner does to Ishbosheth. 1, friends who are in it for something other than friendship will eventually split. If you have a friend, but that friend is a one-note friend, they're only in that friendship for one thing, just note that they will split. Now, I know that when you're starting a friendship, sometimes you only have one or two things in common. I understand that. I'm saying if you have a relationship that is just one thing, and that one thing is all it's ever been, then that one thing is probably pretty easy to break. I've got friends that it would take a lot to break my friendship with them because we have multifaceted relationship. We connect on a lot of different levels. And when you have just one thing, it's not that hard. There are people that I've been friends with that I'm not friends with anymore because we're just so different. The one thing we had in common is now gone, right? I have friends on Facebook that, they said, oh, I want to be your friend. I'm like, sure, whatever. And then you know what comes next, right? Like that day or the day after, hey, I've got a new business opportunity for you. Yeah, it's a pyramid scheme. And the whole reason they want to be my friend is they want to get something from me. And that's an unfriend right there, right? That's a lose my number. That's a block. I don't want to deal with this anymore. This isn't the kind of friend that I'm interested in. And by the way, if you're in something like that, let me just encourage you to not break your friendships on pyramid schemes and stuff. It's one thing. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all of that, but just tuck that away somewhere. What is the connecting point? Sometimes if I don't see anybody after a while, and then they come back and they say, hey, and they ask me a question, I'm like, that's the thing, that's the category that I'm in your mind. That's the connecting point that we have with one another. And if it's a very small thing, if it's one thing, if it's, how is your car doing? Because they were my mechanic once. I'm like, okay. Yeah, that's a pretty tenuous little thread there that binds us together. We're not going to be friends. Not saying I couldn't be friendly, okay? I'm not saying I'm not friendly. I'm just saying when you talk about abiding relationships, there's supposed to be something more than just one little thing. And Abner is not interested in friendship with David. He's not interested in doing the right thing. He wants something else. There's a hidden motive there. And those kind of friends are worth just being wary over. In Proverbs 1, verse 10, Solomon warns his son, presumably Rehoboam, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, cast in thy lot among us, let us all have one purse. My son, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path. Real friendship should be based on the same quality good things, especially when it comes to Christianity. I'm not saying you can't or shouldn't have friends that aren't not believers. I think you should have friends that are not believers. I'm just saying the best kind of friends are probably the people that are sitting in this room right now, because you have a lot in common, being fellow heirs of the grace of life. As we build our church community, it's my hope that you have a lot more connections here than other places. But it's important to remember that is what connects us, and that we're not using one another for something else other than trying to be a help and a blessing to each other. Warning number 2 is that there's a warning for us following God's will when it's convenient. Many people want to claim Christ when it's convenient, when it looks good, when it feels good, when maybe other people would see them well. I can't tell you the number of people that have come into my office because they're in crisis and they say, I'll do whatever it takes to get her back, or I'll do whatever it takes for my kids, da-da-da-da. And it's very important for them for like a week or 2 weeks. Crisis Christians will not last. And we have to understand that. And I hope that wouldn't be the case with you. I hope that every day you're just submitting to the Lord and letting him build on that life that he started. Christ is looking for followers who will follow him in hard times and not just when it feels good or is convenient. It's a dangerous thing. It's going to be a dangerous thing for Abner to go against what he knew to be true, and now all of a sudden he wants to change his mind and look like he's doing the right thing. Oh, well, the Lord did say David should be the king. Yes, where was this 2 years ago, right? Where was this when it mattered. Now you're just seeing kind of the handwriting on the wall and you want to try to get out in front of it. But that isn't going to go well for Abner, and it didn't go well for Aaron Burr. Thomas Jefferson, as being someone who had run against Aaron Burr, never really trusted him. It was the Congress that actually, in fact, Alexander Hamilton was one of the people that made sure that it was Aaron Burr that was the vice president and not the president. And Thomas Jefferson never really trusted Aaron Burr, wouldn't really let him get involved. And when it came time for Thomas Jefferson to run again, nobody wanted Aaron Burr to be the vice president. He was replaced by George Clinton in 1804. And so Aaron Burr decided to run for New York governor and didn't get the nomination again because of Alexander Hamilton. Let's talk now about the next character, Joab. So Abner meets with David. Look at verse 20. So Abner came to David to Hebron, and 20 men with him. And David made Abner and the men that were with him a feast. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go, and will gather all Israel unto my lord the king, that they may make a league with thee, and that thou mayest reign over all thine heart desireth. And David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Now this is a wonderful thing, right? All the bloodshed is now going to be done. Abner, the main antagonist, is saying, I'm laying down my arms, I'm giving you my sword, I'll facilitate all of this. I have clout with the elders of Israel. I'll say, hey, I'm supporting David, you should too, and I've already talked to them. Let's do this. The war is over. David is now going to be king. If nothing else changes, everything points to the fact that David is going to be king over the whole nation of Israel, the thing that he wanted. His men don't have to go fight Israelites. They can fight the Philistines and the Moabites and the Edomites instead. This is a wonderful thing, except Joab wasn't there when this meeting happened. In verse 22, behold, the servants of David and Joab came from pursuing a troop and brought in a great spoil with them, but Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he was gone in peace. Notice at the end of verse 21 and at the end of verse 22, he was gone in peace, meaning he was guaranteed safety. He said, I'll let you go, and our men will not pursue you. Verse 23, when Joab and all the host that was with him were come, they told Joab, saying, Abner, the son of Ner, came to the king, and he hath sent him away, and he is gone in peace. Now, Joab doesn't have any more information except, hey, Abner was here. The guy that killed your brother, he was here, talking with David. What is Joab thinking? He wants my job. And David, my boss, let that murderer go. What's going on here? And so Joab confronts David. In verse 24, Joab came to the king and said, what hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away, and he's quite gone? Thou knowest Abner, the son of Ner, that he came to deceive thee, and to know thy going out and thy coming in, and to know all that thou doest. He's a spy. That's why he came here. You think Abner sincerely wants to make you king? No. He came to find out how many troops you have, the lay of the land, kind of what your guarding is. Hey, it's a good thing that we just came back because we were out there pursuing a troop. They were out getting spoil from the Amalekites or the Edomites or somewhere. But Joab and his men were out there, and Abner came right into the camp. He says, what a dumb move. What were you thinking, David? Abner's he's just going to come back with his army right to Hebron and kill us all. You've destroyed this whole thing. Now, whether Joab really thinks this or not, I think he doesn't. I think it's all a smokescreen. I think he's upset that David decided to listen to Abner at all, but it makes sense why David would, right? So he calls Abner back in verse 26. When Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, which brought him again from the well of Sirah, but David knew it not. Now Joab's going on the back channels. And in verse 27, when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly. Hey, come over here. I just want to talk to you about something. How's the whole thing going to go? Just come over here into this little chamber here. And smote him there under the fifth rib, that he died. Listen, for the blood of Asahel his brother. Now, I thought about this week, and why did Abner fall for this? Because, I kill somebody's brother. I've never done this, of course, but I kill somebody's brother, and then I see that person again. I'm just going to be a little more wary about this. But Abner had conditions of peace from David. It had been a long time, And probably also Abner was thinking he's pretty hot stuff at this moment because he got the elders to agree to abandon their king. He toppled one king, and now he's working with the next one. Maybe it was pride. I don't know. But Abner was not ready for this. He was also not the one to be blamed because it was Joab who subtly killed him. Now, what was wrong with what Joab did? He put personal vendetta over what was best for his nation. Abner was going back to make David king. That was going to stop all the wars. It was going to give him what he wanted. But instead, Joab wanted his revenge. I have to kill Abner. I can't just let him go. He put personal ambition to stay the captain of the host over his duty to the king. Right? Instead, he goes in and rebukes the king and then kills the man who was going to make this deal happen. Again, before he did. Now, if Joab had been thinking, maybe he would have thought, well, let's let this whole thing go, and then I can find Abner in some other place and kill him. But all Joab could think about was me, selfishness. He possibly thought Abner was going to take his job. David had promised him safety. He also made David seem really bloodthirsty, right? Who is going to trust David now? Somebody's going to come and talk to David. Some enemy's going to come talk to David and not assume that the same thing's going to happen to him. Oh, yeah, I heard about Abner. He went to talk to David, and then it didn't get very far, and the captain of the host, David's right-hand man, killed him. Oh, I'm not going to go talk to David. Yeah, conditions of peace? No way, not with that bloodthirsty king. It made a real problem for David. So here's some warnings for us that our actions affect others. We sometimes, if we're not careful, will listen to the lie of Satan that what you do only affects you. Well, that may be true for a hermit living in the middle of the woods somewhere. But all of us have relationships, and God made us for relationships. God made us to be in one another's lives. He made us social creatures. And in the church, that part is really important. And the more you isolate yourself, that's bad. But then the more that you have a relationship with people, the more you just have to understand that your actions have reactions for people that you care about and that care about you. David is now put in a hard position. How is he going to unite the kingdom? Abner was the guy who was going to make it happen, and now he's not. You are a reflection of Christ. What you do, other people, if people know that you're a Christian, other people see that, and that is a reflection on the Lord. How many times have I heard someone say, if that's the way you Christians are, then I want nothing to do with it? We hear this all the time on different spaces and news media or whatever. If that's the way Christians are, don't give me any of that. No, thank you. You're a reflection of Jesus Christ. You're a reflection of your church. You're a reflection of the members of this church. And listen, I'm probably the most aware of this. Like, I go into Walmart or I go into wherever, and my head, and Ron, you probably know about this, your head's kind of on a swivel because you sort of have to be friendly. Have there been times you just kind of wanted to like put a disguise on and go, and I just want my nuts and bolts and I want to leave and I don't want to glad hand everybody? But I'm a representative of the church, and I don't want anyone to think, I'll never go to First Baptist Church, the pastor isn't friendly. You say, people don't say that. They do. Right? And I'm not saying I feel pressure. I'm just saying I'm aware of the fact that I'm a representative of our church. But here's the thing, so are you. People know you're a member of First Baptist Church. You might be the only touch point they have with our church. And it's really important for you to just have that in mind. I'm not making you nervous. I'm just trying to say it's important for you to understand that your actions have effects on other people. Other people, you don't intend for them to get any part of your choice. And yet being in a community means that's going to happen. Warning number one. Warning number two is that revenge is not for us, but for the Lord. Right? God was well able to take care of Abner. Joab didn't have to. I know that Joab was upset. I know that he felt like it was unjust. And in some way, it was very personal because it wasn't just Abner flinging arrows into the melee and it happened to hit Asahel. It was a very personal killing, but it was also in the context of a battle, of a war. And Joab, more than anybody, should have understood that and should have wanted. Remember David, he refused to kill Saul, even though Saul literally almost a dozen times tried to kill him. And yet David said, that's not my job. I'm going to let the Lord take care of this. And Joab, for some reason, did not learn that lesson. And if we're not careful, Bill talked about this week about forgiveness, how we're really tempted to go and want to get our own revenge. We want to get we get on some kind of personal vendetta. And whatever the grudges are, they need to be dropped. Stop holding them. Whatever the thing that you're hoping will happen to somebody else, get to the point, like Bill was saying, to where you can pray for them, that God would help them and God would bless them, rather than I hope God gets them, right? One of the things you know about Aaron Burr, if you know anything about him, is that he was so upset with the way that he felt like Alexander Hamilton was undermining him, that he challenged him to a duel. It wasn't legal in New York, and so they went to Weehawken, New Jersey, where it was still illegal, but it wasn't enforced as much. Alexander Hamilton, from what we could tell, was planning on firing in the air, but before he could, Aaron Burr shot him and killed him. There was a warrant out for his arrest, and all of a sudden now, the sitting vice president of the United States just committed murder on one of the most important people in government at the time. Alexander Hamilton, one of the 3 writers of the Federalist Papers, one who was the first, I think, Secretary of Treasury, a well-known, well-loved man, was killed by an unpopular vice president. And now Thomas Jefferson has to do something about this because our actions affect other people. Let's finally then look at David, because David has clean up on aisle 28. Verse 28, and afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. I hear him putting his hands up like this, like, nope, it's not me. It's not me. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house. It is not me. He puts some distance between him and Joab. And then he has a very public funeral praising Abner. Look at verse 31. David said to Joab and all the people that were with him, rend your clothes and gird you with sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier. And they followed Abner in Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner. And all the people wept. And David lamented over Abner and said, died Abner as a fool dieth? He didn't die as a brave man. He died under treachery, like someone who was not ready to be killed. In verse 34, thy hands were not bound, neither nor thy feet put into fetters, as a man falleth before wicked men, so fellest thou. And all the people wept again over him. When all the people came to cause David to eat meat while it was yet day, David sware, saying, so do God to me, and more also, if I taste bread or aught else, till the sun be down. Verse 38, the king said unto his servants, know ye not that there is a prince and a great man fallen this day in Israel? Now, David had his problems with Abner. Remember back in chapter 26 of 1 Samuel, it was Abner who had failed to protect Saul, and David actually says, you're worthy of death because I came into the camp and we could have killed your king. You're supposed to protect him. So David had a few things with Abner besides the fact that they were combatants, but they'd also served together under Saul. They'd also had a lot of things together, and David knew that Abner didn't deserve what he got. He had to put some distance there. He also then mourned for him. He had to send a message that he wasn't the one that wanted Abner dead. And then in verse 29, he actually puts the blame on Joab where it belonged, uttering a curse to him. Look at verse 29. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house. And then listen to this. And let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or that is a leper, or that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread. Yeesh. Verse 39, I am this day weak, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, be too hard for me. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. Now remember, Joab and Abishai, the 2 brothers of Asahel, they're his nephews. They're his sister's kids. But this isn't the last time that Joab's going to cause trouble for David. Now, David keeps him as the captain of the host, and I don't know exactly why. Later on, he earns the position. I understand that. But he has to put some distance there and actually utters a curse. David mourned for Abner as a soldier, but he needed to show that it wasn't his fault. He still needed to unite the kingdom. He still had to get the Israelite elders on his side, and he wanted to keep Joab as a commander, but also place the blame on him. So some instructions then for us, rather than warning, some instructions. Sometimes you have to make distinctions and separate yourself. Sometimes you have to be able to say, listen, that's not me. And it's hard. I don't believe in throwing friends under the bus, but sometimes when there is a real breach, you have to be able to say, listen, as a Christian, I love this person, but I cannot agree with the choices that they're making and the things that they're doing. That's a very hard thing for us to do. There's a delicate balance where we say, as a Christian, I love you and I care about you, but I cannot agree with these things that you're doing. And when they sin against you or when they sin against somebody else, it's good to come to people's defense and to be someone who's ready to be with them. But if they've done the wrong thing, you can't defend sin. Right? Just because they did the wrong thing, well, we're friends, so I have to defend them. No, you have to defend the honor of Christ. You have to stand up for what's right. And sometimes if your friends aren't doing right, then you have to be able to do something about that. That's an instruction for us. And also then, it is a good thing to be able to help other people clean up their mess. Joab should have thought of this, but he didn't. And David, in his wisdom, had to make the best of a really bad situation. I believe he used God's wisdom to make it very, very clear. Listen, I'm not the bloodthirsty king that Joab makes me out to be. I'm someone who wants peace and someone who wished this would not have happened. Sometimes you have to make that clarity, and it takes a lot of wisdom to try to clean up these kinds of messes. Aaron Burr inexplicably took an expedition out west and tried to raise up an army. I was just training some militias, but it was very apparent very quickly that he was trying to raise up an army to go to war against Spain. And Thomas Jefferson had to write a letter. He wrote it on January 22nd, 1807, a letter to Congress outlining his steps, saying, this is what I found out when I found out. These are the steps that I took, and actually offered an arrest warrant for Aaron Burr because he had made such a mess of everything that Thomas Jefferson was trying to do. I never want to be, for you, as your pastor, a liability. I want, when you meet somebody and you say you go to First Baptist Church, I want them to be able to say, I've heard a lot of good things about that church. Not because I want people to think well of the church, but because we are a lighthouse for God. That we are a lighthouse for Jesus Christ. We're lifting up the Bible, and I want to make sure that I'm an ambassador that represents well. And I never want to be a liability for you, but would you do me the same courtesy? That I don't ever want to meet somebody and say, I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church, and they say, oh, do you know so-and-so? Yeah, I do. They're one of our members. Or they come on a Sunday morning. Yeah, well, no, I haven't. I'm thankful for that. Just be aware that there is a community, and especially in Park Rapids, Monaga, Frazee, there are small communities here that word gets around pretty quickly. Let's be aware of those kinds of things. Let's make sure that we, as a community, are looking after each other and not just being selfish. Oh, it doesn't matter, I can do whatever I want. Yeah, you can. But other people are going to suffer for that. And you're really going to undercut not just the people in this church, but the message that we're trying to proclaim. Let this be a warning. Let this be an instruction for us.